So welcome everyone. We'll be recording tonight's meeting just for our reference and to have online. So thanks for joining us today. We're having a community conversation about the North, Middle, and Outer community planning area. My name is Ellie Schaefer. I'm a planner, urban designer with the firm MIG. We're helping the city of Charlotte on this effort. So I'll let city staff introduce themselves real quick as well. Catherine, if you want to cue that up.
Sure. I'm Catherine Mahoney, Senior Project Manager with the Charlotte Planning, Design, and Development Department. And Ms. Edwards, I see that you have a question about the Mallard Drive barrier. Tracy Newsom is a transportation planner with the Department of Transportation, and I'll ask that she speak to that at a certain point in our presentation. We'll talk about the streets map, and then she can respond based on what it is or isn't in your concerns. So Tracy, can you stay with us and be ready to respond at that time?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So on October 13th, we hosted an informational meeting to discuss how two maps, the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map and the Charlotte Streets map, will inform future growth, development, and mobility around the city of Charlotte. So we can put a link to that meeting recording in the chat, but in today's meeting, we'll provide a brief overview of what was covered in that informational meeting, including the purpose of each of these two maps and how they relate to one another. So the majority of today's meeting, however, is going to be focused on a community conversation around the draft 2040 policy map. So we want to provide an up-close look at how the 2040 policy map recommendations were developed within this geography. And then we want to talk about how we might need to revise the citywide mapping approach to make it more accurate or better aligned with the comprehensive plan. So with that, let's briefly review what was covered in that informational meeting. So what is the purpose of the 2040 policy map and the streets map? The purpose of these two maps is to help implement the vision of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. This plan is the guiding document for our city's growth and development over the next 20 years. The comprehensive plan was adopted in June 2021, and there are now several major initiatives underway to help put the plan into action, including those shown on the bottom half of this slide. So the 2040 policy map will identify appropriate locations for future development in our community. The streets map will help define the multimodal vision for Charlotte's streets to support mobility between the places we live, work, and play. And then the Unified Development Ordinance will consolidate and update the city's land development regulations, so future development is aligned with the vision of the comprehensive plan. The draft of the Unified Development Ordinance was released on October 7th and can be found at cltgov.me/CLT future. So you can go there if you want some more information. We'll put that link in the chat as well. So how do these two maps relate to one another? Both maps, the 2040 policy map and the streets map, help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan, and they'll accomplish this by informing how our built environment evolves and changes over time. So the built environment includes both land use and transportation related characteristics. So each map provides supporting information about the places we want to create. In particular, the 2040 policy map will inform the type of development, including land uses and building form, that's appropriate to occur in specific geographies throughout the community. The streets map will define the future cross sections for arterials in the city and streetscape requirements for those arterial roadways. So with an understanding that both maps are intended to help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan and that they will help inform the city's built environment over time, let's briefly take a closer look at the streets map and then the 2040 policy map. So what makes a street? A street looks, feels, and functions the way it does based on all of the pieces within, extending from building front to building front. So all the components in between those buildings are important. This is a diagram that we call a street cross section. So you can see in this diagram how the various components of the street work together to serve all users and to create streets that allow people to move about our city in more ways and more easily. The streets map is the mapped vision for our multimodal street network. It's based on council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last several years. It shows the recommended cross-section for all of Charlotte's arterial streets and will support both the 2040 policy map and the Unified Development Ordinance to help ensure that we're providing a multimodal street network for growth that supports our future growth and development. So the streets map is currently in a draft state. We want to remind you that you can go online to review and provide comments on the streets map, along with the policy map through November 14th. In the map, you can click on an arterial street, and there will be a pop-up box that includes information about the street cross-section that you can review and provide comments on. There's a more detailed instructional video on the website for how to review and comment and use this map tool. So that's going to be at cltgov.me/CLT future. Knowing we had a question related to the streets map, I believe already, I'm going to take a quick pause before we get into detail on the 2040 policy map. I don't know if Tracy, you wanted to weigh in on that question in the chat, if you could see it.
Sure. I think I saw the question related to some of the comments that we've received about the Mallard Drive collector street. And I just wanted to let people know that one of the key things to understand about the streets map is not only what it is and how it'll be used, but how it won't be used. The streets map is not a project map. So I want to make everybody aware that, you know, because something is showing up on the map, it is not necessarily a project, and it is not a project. It doesn't indicate priorities. It doesn't indicate construction projects or investment areas. So, you know, for folks who are thinking that something showing up on the map is actually a project, it's not. The other thing I want to assure people about is that we are collecting all of these comments. We're cataloging the comments, and we will be, you know, providing responses to all the types of comments that we receive over the next few weeks. And so these comments we're aware of them. We are cataloging them and collecting them all together, and we'll be responding to those. But those are kind of the two key points I wanted to make for folks who have those concerns and who have provided those comments.
Great, thanks, Tracy. So moving on to the 2040 policy map, this is a companion document to the comprehensive plan. It will translate the plan's place-based policies to specific geographies in the community. Place-based policies are those in the plan that provide guidance for where and how development should occur. So when adopted, the 2040 policy map will replace the city's current policy map, which is called the future land use map. This map aims to provide comprehensive and citywide direction for how Charlotte will balance both the needs and opportunities that come with future projected growth. This mapping effort will also ensure we align future growth with infrastructure capacity, so we grow smartly and maximize our resources. Finally, the 2040 policy map's citywide direction means we can ensure historically underserved areas are guaranteed better access in the future, and Charlotte becomes a more equitable city. Since the objective of this mapping effort is to evaluate and balance citywide needs and opportunities, the future 2040 policy map will not provide parcel-specific or block-by-block analysis that has historically occurred during the small area planning process. So the 2040 policy map was developed using a new tool called place types, and it followed a three-step process. Place types are a new classification system to organize patterns of development. They're not zoning districts. Place types are more complete and holistic than the city's current classification system, which is called future land use. So place types provide guidance for the mix and proportions of land use, building form and design, mobility, and open space. This place types tool was vetted by the community during development of the comprehensive plan. Stakeholders provided input on the types of places right for Charlotte. The 2040 policy map process applies the place types vetted during the comprehensive plan to specific geographies throughout our community. Using this new place types tool, the draft 2040 policy map was developed following 3 steps. The first step was to translate existing development that's on the ground today into place types. So this step was completed to illustrate how the place types are intended to be applied at a half block or block level, and is a helpful point of reference. The second step was to translate the city's adopted area plans and zoning districts into place types. So this second map illustrates how Charlotte would grow if we did nothing different and didn't map the comprehensive plan policies. So we think of this second step as sort of a business as usual or a status quo type of map. We're calling the second map the adopted policies map. The third step built upon and revised that second map to reflect the comprehensive plan policies. So by building off the adopted policies map, that second map, this process doesn't erase past planning efforts that are still valuable to our community. Instead, it respects what's working for our community and only revises the shortcomings that fail to address the city's current and future needs.
Ellie, before you move on, Ms. Johnson has her hand up.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. My name is Renee Perkins Johnson. I'm the District 4 Council Representative, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ensure that all of the residents got the answer that they needed regarding the Mallard Drive barrier. So I saw that Ms. Wakefield in the chat that she did say thank you, but I want to make sure we're getting emails about that, and I just wanted to clarify that everyone gets the clear information that they needed. So thank you for this presentation. We're looking forward to the process, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so here's a bit more detail on what went into each of those 3 mapping steps for the 2040 policy map. The first major input for the adopted policies map, the second map, included future land use recommendations from area plans adopted since 2010. This guidance accounts for approximately 27% of our land area. For the remaining portions of the city, the second map was informed by the zoning or existing entitlements of a property. So in instances where the existing zoning district did not clearly translate to one place type, market support analysis was used to identify what was the most realistic future of a given property. The major inputs used to revise the second map and produce a draft 2040 map include the equitable growth framework and the preservation policies from the comprehensive plan. And then the draft recommendations were checked against several other data sources, such as our growth projections, environment, infrastructure capacity, and market readiness. So the place type palette itself includes 10 different place types. Those are shown on this page. They generally fall into what we call like a live, work, and play, different categories. So they include 3 different scales of activity centers, which are all mixed use. Then there's 2 different neighborhood types, parks and preserves, and a few other place types where people mostly work or visit. So I'm seeing a few more chats, and I'm going to pause here before we get specifically into this community planning area so we can respond to some of these questions. So let's see, going up to Megan Furlow, you asked, can we ask about the opening of Mallard Drive? Is that, if that is approved as a planned opening, then it will be a planned project later on. So Tracy, I don't know if you want to respond to that one specifically.
Sure. I kind of want to go back and make sure that folks understand that some of these questions, that's exactly why we're out here right now collecting these questions. You know, the streets map is based on adopted policies through the years, and what's there is in draft form, and that's why we're collecting the comments. And so, you know, again, just to kind of set the stage for what it is and what it isn't, you know, the main purpose of it is to support the UDO and to provide clarity and consistency for arterials, for example, in the way the UDO is applied. But specifically, the reason we're out here and the reason we're kind of working with you all on the policy map side is to create, kind of a seamless way for folks to look at the policy map and the streets map together, and to provide these comments, and then for us to collect those comments as we have been doing now for a few days, and to then come back with responses to the variety of comments that we receive. So I think there's a question that says, we would like to have input before the policy map is approved. That's exactly the process we're in right now, is to go through, collect comments, review those comments, refine the draft as necessary, and come back out with it as a second draft.
And Tracy, could I add to that? We're collecting comments on both the policy map and the streets map right now. Each map will be reviewed and adopted by city council separately though. So
Yep.
Just understand that these are two different mapping initiatives. We felt like it would be more helpful to bring them out together so people could understand the relationship between them, and provide and, ask for input once rather than twice. But they are still two different maps, and we'll go through two different review and adoption processes.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, for clarifying that. We're trying to make it easy for folks to provide comments and to understand how the maps relate to each other, but they are separate maps for adoption.
So can I just clarify then, Catherine? And I appreciate it. This is why I wanted to talk this through. On the email, it's according to Taiwo, it states that these were misconceptions. And I've shared that with a couple residents. So it's my understanding from this that there's not a plan to remove this. So I know you're speaking at a very high level, but I just want to be clear on, is that in the plan, or are you saying it's in the plan and it's subject to feedback, or is it a misconception? Or can you just a little more directly tell us, is the barrier on Mallard Drive being proposed to be removed, or how are residents seeing that information? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question for Tracy. Sorry, I'll defer that to her.
So what they're seeing is part of what's the collector layer for the streets map. And so those streets are identified as collectors and have been for some time. It's really, the streets map is kind of a compilation of already existing information. And so the direct answer is that is not a project. There is not a project identified to remove that barrier.
And if it should become a project in the future, I mean, is there a plan to remove barriers from collector streets?
So that's, again, kind of a high level question. There are reasons why, very good policy reasons why connections are important. That's basically how people can move around, and how it is we're able to have neighborhoods where people have access to the shops that they want to get to and all of that. So there is a goal to create more connectivity. What they're seeing on the map probably is something that shows an old barrier, that it's implying that it's a project. This is not a project. There is a policy. There are policies that we have for connectivity. But that specific road is not identified as a policy, and that's exactly why what we're collecting is the information. People are looking on the map and they're seeing that that collector network shows the a little portion that's a dashed line as a potential future connection, and that's probably what people are seeing and responding to, but that is not an identified project.
Okay, thank you. Then I would just like to say, as the council rep, if it becomes, that specific location becomes a project in the future, I'd like to, we'd like to have input, and the community have input, and for that to be communicated early on and considered And we'd like the community to be engaged in that, because there's not an interest for that specific area to have that barrier removed.
Right. If anything that would become a project, then the neighborhood would be involved in that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Thank you for clarification.
All right, great. So, so now let's zoom in. We're going to look at the 2040 policy map, specifically in this north, middle, and outer community planning area today. So the phase 2 community conversations we're having at this point are organized around the 15 different community planning areas. So I think you're all pretty familiar with the area, but we're really looking here at north, middle, and outer. So we're bounded by I-77 on the west, I-85 and North Tryon on the south, and then we go just a bit past I-85 on the north and east. So we're just a bit northwest of UNC Charlotte here. So as I mentioned, the mapping approach began by translating what's on the ground today and then what future place types would look like without the comprehensive plan. So that's sort of the first 2 steps in that 3-step process. So this is the existing development map for this community planning area. This map reflects existing development translated into our new place type tool. So this translation was based on existing land use data and development patterns. In this community planning area, you'll see we've got a good amount of the purple color on the west side near I-77, which is manufacturing and logistics, as well as some commercial, which is red mixed in there. And then we've got some campus in that teal color near UNC Charlotte, near I-85, just on the opposite side of the highway there. And then we're mostly looking at neighborhood 1 with some other place types sprinkled in. So here you can see the change to the adopted policies map. So this is a second step in the mapping approach to translate the city's adopted policies and existing entitlements into place types. So again, this does not consider comprehensive plan policies at this step. So the net change from existing development to this map is shown on the right side of this slide. You can see from what's existing to what adopted policies call for in terms of place types. We're losing a good amount of parks and preserves. That's one that jumps out. So that's going to largely be because of the zoning. So most likely those areas of parks and preserves that existed in the existing map were actually zoned for neighborhoods and could be redeveloped into residential. So I'll talk about how this is revised on the 2040 map in just a minute. You can also see we get a little bit more of a mixed use community activity center in the blue color near Harris Boulevard and I-85. And then we get a little bit more, we don't have any vacant land in these future looking maps. So all the gray colors have translated some to commercial, which is red, some to this light pink, which is innovation mixed use. So that's just a few points I'll call out on the adopted policy map. So now we'd like to walk through how place types were revised from that adopted policies map to better align with the vision of the community and the comprehensive plan. So first, we're going to look at the preservation policies from the comprehensive plan. The plan includes policies to preserve existing neighborhood 1, parks and preserves, and manufacturing and logistics place types. So you can see those 3 place types shown on this map: yellow, purple, and green. So now we're looking at the 2040 policy map. So in some areas, these place types were already preserved based on adopted policies, but the areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where these place types were preserved as part of the 2040 policy mapping step. So you can see the percent change here on the right side of the slide, and that shows the change from the adopted policies map to the 2040 policies map. So we were able to preserve 34% more parks and preserves in this community planning area, based on the policies in the comp plan. We also preserved more manufacturing logistics. And while it looks like we're losing neighborhood 1, it's a comparison to the adopted policies map. So if you recall, the adopted policies map gained, I think it was about 20% neighborhood 1, and that was largely coming out of parks and preserves. So we're just gaining a little bit less ultimately in neighborhood 1. from the existing condition. So we're going to step through a few groups of place types at a time. And as we do that, we'd like to ask you some questions about what you've seen reflected in the draft so far. We think a number of steps described in the current mapping approach are accomplishing goals of the comprehensive plan, but we'd like to hear whether or not you agree. So here's our poll that was just launched. So this question is about, does the mapping step to preserve neighborhood 1 and parks and preserves align with Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan's direction to protect community assets? And you can respond between strongly agree and strongly disagree. Again, later in this session, we'll have a chance for more feedback. We're going to talk about potential changes to the methodology, the mapping approach, and we'll also take a closer look at manufacturing and logistics place type a little bit later in this presentation. Seeing a few comments in the chat, so let me just read those really quickly. So Amy said that you heard that Clark's Creek Nature Preserve was formed with the understanding it couldn't be disturbed for 100 years. Is that accurate? We've seen there's a proposed road going directly through it. It is a very popular park for residents in the Wellington neighborhood. That is a good question. Catherine, do you want to respond about that one in particular?
I can't speak to that. I'm sorry, somebody else trying to speak? Ms. Wakefield, I'm sorry, I don't know whether or not the nature preserve has a condition like the one you described. If there is a road proposed to go through it on the streets map, you're more than welcome to comment on whether or not you think that alignment is warranted or appropriate. I know that alignments are identified and recommended through another process, but the streets map is still an appropriate place to share that comment, and then we can relay that feedback accordingly.
Thanks, Catherine.
And we've had 4 of our 10 participants participate, but it's been about 2 minutes, so I'd recommend closing the poll at this point. And I'll share those results.
Yeah, I can see them actually, so I can speak to them. So looks like we got 2 responses for agree and 2 responses for neutral in terms of, does this mapping step preserve a neighborhood 1 and parks and preserves? So that's a slightly positive lean, but definitely we can take a closer look at the methodology for those preservation policies moving forward. Okay, so next we'll look at the mapping of access to housing opportunity policies. So the comprehensive plan calls for creating a more equitable future for all of Charlotte, which means we need to ensure future growth and development benefits everyone. In order to measure who does and doesn't currently benefit from past development, the comprehensive plan included the equitable growth framework, which assesses which areas have low access to housing diversity, jobs, goods and services, and are impacted by environmental justice issues. So we'll go through each of those major policies in this presentation, starting with housing here. So on this map, areas outside of the black diagonal hatches are lacking access to housing diversity. So meaning you can't easily find a variety of housing types in the areas outside of the black diagonal hatches. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access to different housing types is currently lacking. This step in the mapping approach was focused on making place type recommendations that would provide better opportunity to housing unit diversity. So the items that aren't underlined can happen really within any neighborhood, and therefore we'll be looking into other tools outside of place types to help address those gaps. So again, we're mostly looking at housing unit diversity here and how we can map place types to improve that. Neighborhood 2, which is shown in orange on the map, is a place type that helps provide more housing opportunities through housing unit diversity. Here you can see in orange where neighborhood 2 is mapped. In some areas, neighborhood 2 is already mapped based on adopted policies. Again, the areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where neighborhood 2 was recommended as part of this step. So you can see there is some additional neighborhood 2 outside of the black hatch areas that should help improve access to housing diversity. And there's a 16% increase in neighborhood 2 on the 2040 map than the adopted policy map. During this step, we also evaluated a number of features when we were looking for housing opportunities, including sensitive environmental features, development status, so whether a property is undeveloped or underdeveloped, proximity to transit, proximity to other place type assignments, land suitability for different uses and densities, and more. So those are just some other pieces that we looked at really for each step of the equitable growth framework policies in this mapping process. I'm just going to call those out now. So here's just a clean version of the map where you can see those first 4 place types in this community planning area. Just leave that up for a second. So again, we'd like to ask a question about this step of the mapping as we go. So now we're looking at the second row in this table on the slide. Here's our polls. So we're asking, is more neighborhood 2 in areas with low access to housing opportunity a good approach to increasing housing diversity in the future? I see William's comment on the last poll about it's a bit confusing because of planning speak. We do tend to use that. We try to put things into terms everyone understands. So if I can clarify at all, don't hesitate to speak up and ask a question. Seen 2 responses come in so far. 1 person agrees. Oh, here's a few more. 2 for neutral, 1 for disagree. I am curious if this person would like to speak up about who responded disagree. I'm curious why that's your response. Just would like to hear how you're feeling about neighborhood 2 increasing access to housing or not. Not sure if they're able to speak up.
Ellie, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll since it's been over a minute now.
Okay.
Please, whomever disagrees with this approach, feel free to comment. All right, so next equitable growth framework policy that we mapped during this process was access to employment opportunities. So on this map, we've got the same black hatch, but it's in a different area. It's representing, so areas outside the diagonal black hatch are lacking existing access to employment opportunity. Again, the bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to establish where access to employment is currently lacking as part of the comprehensive plan. The place type mapping aimed to provide the opportunity for employment within a commute shed, so 1.5 miles of every neighborhood, not necessarily provide employment within every neighborhood. The items that aren't underlined again can happen within any employment area. So we'll be looking into other tools beyond place types to help address those gaps. Campus and innovation mixed use are 2 place types that can help provide more employment opportunities within close proximity to neighborhoods. So here you can see in teal and light pink where these 2 place types are mapped. Again, some of these place types were already mapped as part of the adopted policies. Highlighted blue areas show where we added them as part of the 2040 map. So here you can see the first 6 place types on the 2040 policy map. Again, we've added innovation mixed use up near I-85 and the city boundary. And then there's some campus down by I-85 across the highway from UNC Charlotte. I'll also add that our activity center place types expand access to both employment and housing opportunities. So we're going to get to those ones in our next step. So our question at this point is the third one on the slide here. Is mapping campus and innovation mixed use in areas with low access to jobs a good approach to increasing job access in the future?
We'll give about a minute for everyone to participate. Got someone in the chat, William, asking what does campus mean? So the campus place type, it's mostly employment focused. It can take different forms. It could be an educational campus like a university. It could be an office campus with a lot of different office uses. It could be a medical campus with a hospital and supporting medical uses. There's usually going to be some mix, so some supporting, retail or restaurant uses in there, and potentially some residential as well, but really more of a work focus or an employment focus. Okay. A lot of neutral responses there. Looks like we got 1 agree and 1 disagree. It's landing right around the middle with that one. Anyone who wants to put any comments about why, feel free to do so in the chat. So next we're going to look at access to essential amenities, goods, and services. So this was the 3rd component of the equitable growth framework in the comprehensive plan. So here, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to essential amenities, goods, and services. The bullet points on this slide are the metrics that were used to understand where access is currently lacking. The underlying metrics were specifically identified as items place type mapping could help address. The items that aren't underlined can be provided in any place type. And so again, we'll use other tools outside of place types to address the gaps in those areas. So we're really looking at what place types can provide better access to fresh food, healthcare and pharmacies, and financial services. So commercial and activity centers are place types that can help provide more access to amenities. So here you can see in particular in red, pink, and like a medium blue color where these place types are included on the 2040 policy map. Again, areas highlighted in bright blue were added as part of this mapping step, and the others were added as part of the adopted policy step. So in this case, I think access to amenities was improved pretty well based on adopted policies. We were able to increase neighborhood centers about 5% on this map, and commercial actually went down about 20% from what's shown on the adopted policies map. So here we have the complete 2040 policy map with all of the place types shown. Again, we've got all the changes from the adopted policies map shown on the right side of the slide. So we lost some campus and commercial uses, but we gained parks and preserves, and we gained neighborhood 2 and manufacturing logistics. And again, this is from the adopted policies map. So I think this is our last polling question. This one is mapping activity centers in areas with low access to goods and services a good approach to increasing access to goods and services in the future?
And Ellie, while that poll is open, Ms. Johnson's raised her hand again. Ms. Johnson, do you want to share your comment?
Sorry, I had to close that window. Okay, so I had to step away for a second. The manufacturing place types, can you show me exactly where that is on the map? Is that near behind Concord Mills? Is that the top of Mallard Creek where we're proposing industrial in that area?
So manufacturing and logistics is dark purple on this map. So it's mostly between Old Statesville Road and I-77. And then there's a bit more down on the south part of the community planning area between around I-77 and I-85, a little bit up towards Sugar Creek Road.
Ms. Johnson, what you see in the upper right-hand corner is innovation mixed use. That recommendation was chosen over manufacturing and logistics because of the surrounding neighborhood 1. I understand that this is an area with a pending rezoning though,
Right.
and that rezoning would require manufacturing and logistic, would be better aligned with the manufacturing and logistics place type. I think Taiwo sent out an email earlier this week about how this policy map process at this point can only reflect existing entitlements, not speculative ones. However, we will have an approach for how this map is updated in the future to reflect new entitlements, over the years. So I'll just share that and stop there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, because that's one of the rezonings that I'm, yeah, at this time, I don't, because of traffic and infrastructure, I have a concern. So I wanted to pay attention to how that was being rezoned. So thank you for the information. Thank you.
Will, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I just wanted to jump in here, but I had a question about the small area plans as they relate to the 2040 policy mapping. So we know that there have been a couple of different area plans. I know there's one from 2008 that encompasses the purple area that you guys were talking about as far as industrial. There's a 2015 Prosperity Village area plan, and there's also one that's further down on the university, Prosperity Church Road University area. So my first question is, are those plans going to be taken in consideration when you do the mapping? And the second question is, if not, then is the zoning going for those plans going to be enforced? And that's a terrible way to word that, but let me back up and give you some preface to that. So when we did the Prosperity Hucks area plan in 2015, we did not change the zoning to work together with that area plan. So we had a great area plan, but the zoning wasn't matched to get the outcome. So how do we prevent that from happening? I guess it's a greater question.
Thanks, great question. Yeah, so we did include small area plans from 2010 that were adopted 2010 onwards. So Prosperity Hucks, for example, is one I know that was in there. I don't have the full list on the top of my head. But yes, it was included. It went into the adopted policies map. So this is kind of second map in this process. And then the 2040 policy map built off of that map. So the intention is definitely to preserve, those planning efforts during this process, and only, not change them, but only build upon them where there are lacking access to certain things like housing opportunity or amenities and that sort of thing. So just building upon them, but definitely including them in the process. And then regarding zoning, the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, coming out is another step coming out of the comprehensive plan. So this policy map is informing that process and informing how zoning is going to be changed or applied throughout the city based on the place type mapping. So yes, this will be informing zoning moving forward in another process.
Ellie, I'm going to stop sharing the current poll, if that's okay with you. But I don't know if you want to summarize those comments or.
I lost them.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. You keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so one last component of the equitable growth framework is environmental justice. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are impacted by environmental justice issues. So again, the bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where environmental justice is currently lacking. This is an effort that was done as part of the comprehensive plan. So the underlined items were issues that we could help to address through place type mapping. Non-underlined bullets, again, are going to be are going to require other tools outside of place types to help address those inequities. So again, tree canopy and impervious surfaces, those can happen in any place types. So the other tools, just for example, would be things like programming, design solutions, infrastructure projects, that sort of thing. Let me step back really quickly. The big ones that we were able to address, or we tried to address, were proximity of neighborhoods to heavy industrial uses. This is a bit limited based on existing development. So, there's only so much buffering that you can provide between existing uses. But we've done that where we could. We've also tried to buffer neighborhoods from major transportation infrastructure as much as possible. So, given that our ability to help address these inequities as part of the mapping approach was a bit limited, we would like to ask you, how important is it to explore additional tools to further mitigate environmental justice impacts during the community area planning process?
Can I ask what environmental justice means?
Sure. So environmental justice is, I'll give my best description of this. I'll point you towards the comprehensive plan for a more formal definition, but it's basically areas that have historically have inequities as it relates to the environment. So maybe that's air quality, neighborhoods that were built right up against the highway and they suffer air quality impacts. Maybe it's, the urban heat effect, which is, having a lot of asphalt, not having a lot of parks and tree canopy. There's different aspects to it, but it's often based on historical development patterns. And so a lot of current planning work is looking to help improve those issues for people that live in areas that suffer from environmental injustice. Hopefully that's good enough description.
And again, the question I have is, the areas that are hashed, that are grayed out, are the areas you're speaking about, or the spaces that are not hashed out are the places you're speaking of?
Good question. Yeah, so areas outside of the hatch are impacted by issues related to environmental justice. So you'll see it, some of those areas along the highway, along major roads, and interfaces between neighborhoods and industrial or manufacturing logistics.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, looks like we got 4 of 8 responses thinking that's very important to explore additional tools to further mitigate environmental justice impacts. Okay, so now we want to highlight what the above mentioned or previously mentioned place type recommendations mean for this area in terms of actually attracting new housing units and future jobs. So there's a certain housing growth and job growth projection for the city of Charlotte, and running the place types through our growth model, this community planning area would potentially absorb 14,474 households between now and 2040. So this is 10% of the community planning, the citywide housing growth. And then jobs, based on how the place types are mapped now, this area could absorb a little over 8,000 jobs. So this is about 4% of the citywide projected growth in employment. Okay, so now that we've walked through the draft 2040 policy map recommendations for this area, we'd like to get your feedback on the mapping approach, which is again in draft form. So the objective of this conversation is to collect feedback.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Just for the sake of time, do you mind if we jump to the annotation instructions and collect comments there, and then we could kind of interpret or decipher people's needs based on areas they're identifying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me just jump ahead a few slides. Okay. So we want to talk about any concerns that you might have with the draft map. since we can't be sitting around a map printed on a table, we're using this Annotate tool in Zoom. If you are on your phone, this tool is pretty hard or not really possible to use. So you feel free to put any comments in the chat or speak up with your comments. You can also go to the online map to provide specific comments and get a closer look at the map. And maybe we can drop that link in the chat again at this point. So to get to the Annotate tool, you're gonna, you have a menu bar. It's either a black bar on your screen, or you have a view options button on your screen in Zoom. So you're gonna hit that drop down view options button, or you're gonna click Annotate directly on that menu bar. Again, you're looking for Annotate, the Annotate button. So we're gonna use the stamp just because it's less messy and crazy, and it'll help us see what areas you want to talk about on the map. We're going to use the heart stamp. That's just because it's most visible. So again, feel free to put a stamp anywhere you would like to discuss further. So anywhere you might have a concern or a question on the map. You can use the eraser or the undo tool to edit where you've placed stamps. And then there's a mouse button that you can use to get back to your normal mouse. So we're going to just pull up the map, give everyone a chance to place stamps. And remember, anywhere you want to discuss or have a question about or have a concern, you can place a stamp on the map, and then we'll go through and talk about the different stamps that have been placed. So feel free to go ahead and start stamping on the map now. If anyone has any questions about how to use the tool, feel free to speak up or put something in the chat. I can clarify, but again, looking for your menu bar and the Annotate button, and then the stamp tool.
And while you're all doing that, I so rudely interrupted Ellie, I'm sorry. Let me just explain that the type of feedback that we're looking for, we're happy to hear any of your comments and concerns. The type of feedback that will inform the next draft, however, can be kind of categorized twofold. First, we're looking for input that could inform an additional step or something we need to add to our mapping methodology. So we walked through the current steps that are included so far tonight. And based on your comments, we might identify another step that needs to be added. The other type of input that we're looking for or can be useful is input that identifies or tells us that certain steps in our approach perhaps needs to be refined. There were a lot of steps and various data points involved in this methodology. And so there might be a certain step that needs to be tweaked. Maybe a zoning translation is incorrect, or maybe we need to refine a threshold for a certain place type size. So those are the types of input that we are looking for, and that can be reflected in the second draft. This is not the opportunity for us to look at specific parcels and debate what the future should be, because again, this direction, this mapping approach really reflects the direction from a comprehensive plan, and those values have already been agreed upon by the community. So Ellie, I'll turn it back to you. There's a lot of hearts popping up, which is great.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, and Aaron or Catherine, could you put the online map tool in the chat just a second time? I see that Sue is on a phone. So Sue, if you have any comments, feel free to raise your hand and we can come around to you. But I would recommend you use the online map tool to give specific comments if you're on a phone. Okay, so it looks like we got a handful of stamps on the map. So just to start, I'm seeing one up here. I hope you can see my cursor up at the Community Activity Center up at Prosperity Church Road and I-485. Whoever put a stamp there, would you like to speak up and provide your comment?
Sure. I'd like to comment. That one was one that I put there. The main concern that I have with this area, because that's the one that is most prominent to where I live and the one that I'm most passionate about. My real concerns are with CDOT and how they're planning for growth. And it seems like city planning, and I think most of the residents have taken to the idea that this place can become a very walkable and a very urban area. but CDOT seems to be doing things in contravention to that and seems to want to, as opposed to keeping roads smaller and creating more open spaces, they're looking to add more lanes, add turning lanes, and add more projects that would actually hurt the value of the area. So how was the comp plan, not comp plan, but how would the zoning keep CDOT more in alignment with what the community wants?
Sure. So it sounds like a question about infrastructure and roadway capacity. I think at this point, there's just ongoing coordination that has to be done in relationship between land use, place types, and transportation. So basically, once this is completed and adopted, it'll be out there as the vision, for how Charlotte will grow, and it will impact infrastructure decisions and projects moving forward. But I will say that, something like a highway or a major arterial does have more infrastructure capacity. So that's where we're trying to focus density from a sustainability perspective, to really focus density and mixed uses along existing major infrastructure, rather than having to create more or new roadways elsewhere.
Right. And I think that's my point. That area, contrary to popular belief, has plenty of capacity to absorb more growth than we're seeing. And I agree with your statement. What I'm asking for is to not widen our roads, or add more roads, or add more lanes. I think what I'm asking is, can we do more to increase connectivity and pedestrian mode share as opposed to increasing cars? We need to start planning for people and not planning for cars that just happen to have people with them. Yeah,
absolutely. Great point. Within each of the place types, there's guidance for not only land use and built form, but also mobility. So it looks at multimodal mobility recommendations and how those are appropriate within each of the different place types. That's definitely something we're considering and think is really important as well. Okay, so now we've got 2 hearts down here by the this W label on Harris Boulevard. Looks like it's around some neighborhood 2 in orange, some neighborhood 1 in yellow, and some parks and preserves. So does anyone want to provide their comment on that area?
I'll jump in at once. I was responsible for the one on WT Harris. And again, I guess my question is, we've seen a lot of, WT Harris is a very busy road. It's a very wide road. So it is not at all conducive to pedestrian traffic or connections between the neighborhoods that, as you can see, are on either side of it. That has contributed to the failure of all of these strip malls. And, that's a greater discussion there, but because we haven't thought about how people interact with WT Harris, or even if this is the appropriate road for this area, we've come up with a lot of blight here. So I'm wondering, is there, in my reading of the comp plan, it actually allows for some redevelopment to increase density and make this a lot better place. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sorry, could you clarify what your question was exactly?
So with the new zoning maps, will the new zoning ordinance provide the ability to increase density of these strip malls along Harris, which would allow for greater pedestrian flexibility?
Got it. So I'll just have to point you towards the Unified Development Ordinance website. That's a separate process from the place types mapping. So in terms of exactly what will happen with the zoning, I can't speak to that at this point, but in terms of what's mapped place types, it's not showing really mixed use place types. It's showing neighborhood 2 in orange, and then some commercial there in red. So that would be a great type of comment that we can include, that you're interested in potentially more density, mixed use, and improvements to that corridor, if I'm hearing you right. Okay, and we're just about at time. I just want to give this person a chance to speak up if they wanted to. Here at Mallard Creek Road and Prosperity Church Road, if you had a comment about that stamp, then we can close up.
I finally figured out how to unmute myself. I put the heart there in the Wellington neighborhood. with the understanding that we're actually coming to kind of give feedback as to whether that's a good idea to remove the barrier, but I understand that's not what you're seeking tonight. Is that correct?
Correct. Right now, we're focusing on the 2040 policy map, which is looking at sort of land use, built form,
Okay.
and this tool place types. But you can go, if you look in the chat on Zoom here, there's a link to the projects, to the city's website, and you can provide comments on the streets map there, and that might be what you're looking for
Okay.
specific feedback.
Thank you. Sorry for taking up the time.
No, that's okay. All right, so we're just a couple minutes past the hour, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to remind everyone, we've got the online comment application. You can provide more comments and feedbacks both on the streets map and the 2040 policy map through November 14th. There's also hard copies available of the comment form at libraries and YMCAs in the city. So we're going to continue these community conversations until about November 10th. And we're recording all the sessions. They're going to be on the project website. There's also makeup sessions if you're not able to make it to any that you're interested in. And then again, our community feedback will be used to identify citywide revisions to the policy mapping approach. We're not really doing parcel by parcel revisions as part of this effort. And we'll have a second draft of the 2040 policy map expected early next year. So with that, we will close. Thank you all for your feedback today. We'll make sure we save everything that we received in the chat as well, and appreciate you coming.